Okay, so in the Purim spirit, the other spirit, it's going to be pretty wacky. So, Chavi isn't here? She
had to go to a doctor's appointment.
Okay. So she sent a question from her friend, what's her friend's name? Haley? No. What was the woman that was here last time? Doesn't usually come. Something with an H for some reason. I think. What was her name?
Haley?
I don't remember. It doesn't sound right.
Heidi?
Heidi.
Oh,
Some-
Heidi, yeah.
Right. Okay. Something with an H. Anyway, so the question was about last time. I don't know if everybody heard. I don't remember who was here and who wasn't. For some reason, I have a blank about where that class was given. But we talked a lot about Amalek being competitiveness. So now I see from the people going like this. Now I know who was here, or at least who was. So the question she asked is, so what do you do to actually overcome it? How do you overcome your competitiveness? How do you stop Amalek dead in his tracks inside you? And again, this is not the usual understanding that Amalek has something to do with. They said they can't hear me. Hold on. Just put this. My microphone is gone. Can you hear me now? This is weird. I don't think it's. So I hope you can hear me, but I'll put it closer.
This is how people do those YouTube videos.
Yes?
That's how the YouTube videos are taken. I was wondering, how do they get their phone to stop something?
Okay, so we said that usually we associate Amalek with doubt. But according to the Alter Rebbe, he's competition, that everything that he sees, he has to compete. So when Am Yisrael came out of Mitzrayim, because we suddenly had some success, so he has to come fight right away. He has to show that he's better. And as long as we were in Egypt and enslaved there, so the Miriam Rhodes joined? How did you do that? Oh, you want to see if you can hear?
What?
It says that you joined
No,
us.
It just went on, and I was a bit startled.
Okay. So, told you it would be wacky. So as long as we were enslaved and we weren't anywhere on the scene, so he didn't care. The moment we start moving forward, so he comes right away and fights us. So how do you solve that problem in you? So we didn't have a chance to talk about it last week, but the solution is, it says in Masechet Erchin that each one of the garments, the 8 garments of the high priest, is a rectification for a different problem in the psyche and in one's conduct. So you can't get into the whole thing now, but it's for a different time. Some other time we'll talk about all of them, even though it's all connected to Purim, because Achashverosh was dressed in the garments of the high priest. But the one that rectifies, according to the Mea Shiloach and other Hasidic Sfarim that build on this, that rectifies the sense of ga'ava, of having this feeling of I have to be higher than you, which is the source of competition, is the tzitz. What the high priest has across his forehead. It's a plate of gold, headband, and what does it say on it? It says Kodesh LaHashem. Kodesh LaHashem means this is sanctified for God. It's that's the thought to have across your head, that whatever I'm doing can it be sanctified for God. And that takes out the feeling of having to compete with other people. It's a big deal. A lot of people have trouble with this. I mean, throughout their lives, that well, you know all about it, but a lot of people don't understand that they're still dealing with having to feed their image of themselves. And so the moment that you take that out and you say that the reason that I'm doing something,
Feeding with the image of their ego?
okay, the image of self, the way they see themselves. So the moment that you take that out, that you can cancel that, then everything changes. If I could use an example that was just given this week from one of the people that I see. So I started with a joke that it's not a nice joke, so I won't say. Anyway, it's a little anti-Semitic. In any case, it's well, you know what? I'll say two jokes that way. One will be anti-Islamic and one will be anti-Semitic. That way we can sort of balance them out. So we'll start with the anti-Islamic one. So there's two beggars sitting in London, and they're trying to collect money. They're both Muslim, and one of them is having tremendous success. The other one is getting nothing. So the one who's having a hard time goes to the one that's having a lot of success, and he says, "Ahmed, what am I doing wrong?" So he says, "Let me see what you have on your sign." So he looks at it and says, "I have 2 wives and 8 children, and we have nothing to eat." He says, "You're going about it all wrong. Look at my sign. I have 2 wives and 8 children, and I'm only 10 pounds away from going back to Pakistan. Please help." So that's the other one, which is the anti-Semitic one. Again, this is all Purim, so you can you can do everything backwards. So there's this Jewish man in Holland, and he has a Dutch neighbor, and the Dutch neighbor says, "I've got this problem all the time. All the burglars for some reason they come to my house, and I've been broken into like 10 times in the last month. I don't know what to do." So it says, "We Jews, we don't have that problem." So it says, "Really, what do you do?" It says, "We have this little thing that we put on the doorpost, and it guards our home." He says, "It's an alarm system?" No. It's just a piece of parchment, and it says a few verses from the Torah. It's called a mezuzah, and if you put it on your doorpost, you'll see that you won't have any more burglars." So the Dutch guy, what does he know? He buys a mezuzah, he puts it up. A month later, he comes to the Jew, to his neighbor, and the Jew sees him and says, "No, what happened? Did it not work, or why are you coming?" He says, No, it worked perfectly. There's no more burglars. It's unbelievable. But from the moment that I put this thing up, there's a non-stop parade of Jews coming to ask me for money. So I came to the conclusion that it's cheaper to have my house burglarized than to. Okay, so that's enough for these things. So why did I even want to tell this whole thing? That when people come to you and they ask for money, so a lot of people get upset. The moms, they get upset about it. Why they get upset? Because why are you imposing on me? What are you doing? The situation becomes even more complex if somebody was giving a lot and suddenly he feels that he can't give as much. But if you give a certain amount over time, people become used to it, right? The people that are coming to collect. So they get used to the fact that you give them a certain amount. And if you don't, so not all of them are so nice. And they can show it to you that right? Why you suddenly stop? So some of them are very, knuim, they're very submissive, and they won't say anything. But a lot of times you get the dirty looks. And so you got even more upset. So what's the source of all that? It's that the person can't admit to themselves that they don't have as much as they used to. Meaning I have to keep feeding my image, which is that I have a lot. And again, it's not that it's okay for somebody who's coming to ask you for money to give you a dirty look. I'm not saying that it's okay. It's not okay. The question is, how is it rubbing off on you? And if it's causing you to get angry, upset at them, that's a different issue. You can feel that they're wrong. You don't have to get upset. The getting upset is because you're really upset at the fact that you can't admit to yourself, and certainly you can't admit to them, that you simply don't have what you used to have. So what's the first step? The first step is to admit. Achna is to admit. Is hod. It's to acknowledge where you are. Don't be afraid of where you are. You have to first of all know where you stand. Al tashlet atzmacha.
Could it be also like an internal example, like not just the person coming to ask me and I cannot give them the usual stuff, but like I cannot keep up with the rhythms that I used to be able to keep up with regarding the work I do.
Maybe. There's a lot of things, but I can't admit to myself that I'm not in the same position that I used to be. The worst is, I experienced this a few years ago, when your father was alive and he helped you all the time, so you felt like Mr. Big Shot because he had a lot. So you gave a lot of tzedakah everywhere, and then suddenly you're on your own. Oh, now I'm in a completely different position. And what's difficult about it? Because you can't admit to yourself that you're not your father, you're not your parents. That what they had is their cheshbon in Shamayim. And what you have is different cheshbon. It's something entirely different. And there's no guarantees that what they had is how you're going to. So if you were living off of the giving tzedakah from their account, or thanks to their account, when that ends, so suddenly you're in a new position. So first of all, you have to be able to admit it. But that's only achna. What would be the avdalah here? What would be the separation? The separation is to understand that they're not coming to me. Who are they coming to? They're coming to Hashem. I'm just stuck here in the middle. So, if they go to me like, no, where is it? Where's what you used to give me? So, what do I have to do? I have to say to Hashem also, same thing. What happened? Why not continue using me as a vehicle for the tzedakah that you want to give? Because in the end, you want to give these people tzedakah, so why not? Why shouldn't it be me? That's the avdalah already. And we take it one step deeper.
Say that again. What's the avdalah?
That I understand that they're not really coming to me. They were never coming to me. They were coming to Hashem. They were coming to. That's my divine soul.
So it's clarifying.
So, but let me make the point clearer. Avdalah is already understanding that everything that's happening here is divine. It's not just, right? It's not me and my animal soul having to provide for them. It's my divine soul. My divine soul is very rich. So if they come to me and they make this motion, come to me and give me, so they're really doing it towards Hashem. They're giving me, you could say, the seal of approval. It's like a sign from Hashem. Come and ask already. Don't leave it the way it was. Don't be content with the submissiveness. Right? Submissiveness says that the rectification is I'm lowly. That's all I am.
But I have to ask for a better situation.
No, but the avdalah is already emunah v'bitachon that it's going to be different. It's not going to stay this way. How do I know it's time to let's move on? You don't have to stay in the submissive state, the lowly state of not having. Because they come to you and they say, no. So what are they really saying? Why aren't you yet what you used to be? It should come back to you. So that you take it, if you take it in the right way, you take it as a sign that you can now address Hashem again and ask for it. Again, it's to be just a nefesh elokit, just your divine soul that wants to give tzedakah. I want to do the mitzvah. So don't prevent me from having the mitzvah. It's like Hashem is telling you, ask me already. Why haven't you been asking me? So that's called Kodesh LaHashem. That the moment that I do it, not for my honor, for my sake, that was rectified by the submission. That I understand that I don't have. But now I want to do it for you, so it's not a competition anymore. Because even if Hashem says no, he says no. But I've come to the realization that I'm not giving the tzedakah in order to be known as somebody who gives tzedakah. I'm giving the tzedakah really because it's a mitzvah. I have a divine soul. Why shouldn't my divine soul perform this mitzvah that I love? So that's a simple way of understanding how Kodesh LaHashem changes the entire perspective that I have on what I'm doing. I'm doing it for you. I'm not doing it for me. What does it mean I'm doing it for you? I'm doing it with my divine soul, not with my animal soul. That's the same thing. It's the same thing as saying is I'm doing it for you. Okay.
It can be mixed up then.
What?
I said it can be mixed up.
It's very mixed up in most people.
Okay. Even if you just like to see people happy or have. You know, that's so pure all the time. No.
Well, again, it depends. Why do I like seeing them happy?
I don't know. Whatever.
What is mixed into that? So usually, if you research a little, if you take a little bit of time to introspect, or you talk with somebody else. I had the same thing last night with somebody who's a tremendous, call it caregiver. He's a guy who gives everything, just all the time. And he sees himself as the ultimate guy. Okay, it's like he's a Mashiach to everybody. But he doesn't necessarily see that this is also feeding his image of himself. And what happens if he can't do it? What does he feel like then? And there are certain places where you can't do it for various reasons.
And if you want to do it because you cannot bear the pain of other people, is it ego?
That's your divine soul. I think it's your divine soul.
No, but then it becomes the place where I cannot take that
Then,
pain anymore.
if it's like
It's
pity,
too much, not pity, but like, I can't see so much pain anymore, and I want to, like, come, how can we alleviate this pain? But like, I have 24 hours, and I have X resources, but I can't.
if it drives me crazy, then it's not from my divine soul. But if I'm able to still contain it, if you don't feel anything, so you're already over bottle, like outside the world.
Yeah.
How can you not cry out when you see something? That's what I said. Like when the divine soul sees that somebody needs, it cries out to Hashem, "Give me more, so I can give more." So if you don't cry out at all, so your divine soul is completely, it's meulaf, it's unconscious. But if it's overwhelming already, so that is from the animal soul. Meaning at some level, I'm worried also about myself. And how am I worried about myself? Maybe I see it, maybe I project and see that one day I'll be in this situation. There's so much suffering in the world, it's eventually going to catch up with me. So what am I doing here? I'm trying to create bituach, insurance policy. I'm trying to create an insurance policy. Why am I doing chesed? It's an insurance policy. If I do chesed to others, eventually they'll come in, right? That's the normal way that people think about society. You watch my back, I'll watch yours. But the truth is that that'll never end. There's no end to that. You can never have enough insurance, put it that way. Okay? You can never get to the point where there's enough insurance. So the only real insurance that you have, the only real bituach is bitachon. There's only trust in Hashem. That's really the only insurance that's ever enough.
Did this man understand this, what you told him? Or I don't know if you told it to him actually.
It's two different people we talked about. So which
Yeah.
one? The one with the
Okay,
caregiving?
Like to yeah.
Yeah, understood it very well. But to understand it is one thing. We'll talk about that today. And to be able to to integrate it into how you feel takes time. But the moment that you understand it, it's a big deal already.
It's obviously a big part of who he is. He should continue
right.
to...
That's his gift.
Yeah.
That's his gift. That's the amazing
But
thing.
just to have the clarity.
Right. It's the amazing thing that all these things are actually gifts, but they fall into the service of the animal soul. Because it's the first one that gets dibs on them, right? Because it was here first. It took advantage of these great, wonderful character traits that people have. And it took them into their side. That's one of the main things, that you have to always remember to say something positive. And I have an incredible story about that I have to share. It's not really related, but it's such a great story that I think it vindicates everything that we're doing. I just read it today from a good friend of mine. This is a true story. There are names, but they asked not to publish the names. I don't know why. I think it's coming out in a book, so they didn't want to say the names before they came out. So the story is that there is this principal in some school, a non-religious school, in if I'm not mistaken, in Ra'anana, like some years ago, probably talking about the 70s. And he notices that there's this one girl that when she comes to school, she's always accompanied only with her grandfather. And the parents are never around. He never saw them. So eventually, he's a new principal. He starts to ask around, and he finds out that the parents passed away, and the grandfather is raising her alone. And there are other kids in the house because they had other children, and the whole thing is very, very dysfunctional. So he decides that he wants to go meet the grandfather and talk to him and ask whether he can help him with something. So he goes, he knocks on their door. The grandfather opens the door. And you can imagine the grandfather's in his 50s. Doesn't have to be like an old man. He's a young grandfather. So he introduces himself, says, "I came to ask if there's something that I can help you with." So the grandfather wasn't very open. So he asked him, "What do you do? What's your job?" So he starts trying to change the subject, but eventually it almost looks like he wanted to tell him. So he says, "Look, I'll tell you if you promise never ever to repeat it." Eventually, I guess he allowed him to repeat it. But so he says, "I'm a thief. That's what I do." What do I do? I go to printing stores, and I pick up the leftover hazmanot, the invitations to all kinds of events, and I know when the events are, and I break into people's homes when they're away at the event. It's a famous thing, right? It's a famous technique. And what can I do? I'm terribly ashamed of it, but I haven't been able to do anything else in my life, and I have a lot of mouths to feed, and I never have enough. So whenever I don't have enough, that's what I do. And I don't know what to say, but how can you help me? So they talked a little bit more, and then the grandfather told the principal, "You know, there's a girl in your school, her name is such and such, and if you really want to help somebody, help her family." So he says, "Why?" He says, "I was there a few months ago in my work,
Wow.
and I have to tell you that I broke into the house, and there's nothing there. There's absolutely no food. Nothing at all. I was so overcome with pain seeing this that I left them 200 shekels on one of the tables.
Wow.
So the principal heard this. He said, "You're a tzaddik. You left him doing. You broke in and you left him money. So what?" Anyway, he parted, and the principal went back home. After the night, in the morning, when the grandfather brought his daughter to school, he was crying, and he said to him, "I have to talk to you." So the principal took him into his office and says, "What's wrong?" So he says, "You don't know what you did to me. You killed me." "Why?" "Because you told me you're a tzaddik. You don't understand. The way I've seen myself my whole life is that I'm the lowest of the low. There's nothing like me." Somebody said that if we didn't know who these people are, we'd think Shlomo Carlebach invented this story. But it's a true story. And suddenly somebody says, "I'm a tzaddik. I couldn't sleep all night. I'm tossing and turning. And I don't know what to do." 2 days later he came back again and he said, "That's it. You finished me. I made a vow to never, ever, ever steal again. And now I really don't know what to do. Now I really have nothing." So the principal was very moved. So he took him to here the schools are actually funded by the municipality, by the Iriyah. So he took him to the Iriyah, and he talked to friends, and he got him a job there. So that's an unbelievable story of what happens when you tell somebody something like this. It's shocking. What is this an example of?
What is that?
It's like a bomb of awakening the divine soul. It's like, I never knew anybody could think something good about me. In the moment that somebody thought even the small, that's what Reb Nachman says, right? The famous Torah Reish Pei Bet 282 in the second part. What does he say? How does he interpret the verse? There's a verse that says, "Od me'at ve'en rasha v'itbonanta al mekomo ve'enenu." Soon there will be no wicked man, because you will meditate on his place and he will be gone. So Rav Nachman says, what does it mean that Od me'at ve'en rasha v'itbonanta al mekomo? That you have to remember that everybody has a makom in this place, in this world. It doesn't matter what, even if he's a thief, Hashem still wants him. Hashem is keeping him here. So he must be a tzaddik. Where this tzaddik is, that's his makom. That's what it means. Al tadun et chavercha ad shetagia limkomo. That you can't really judge somebody until you see his makom, his place, which is his positive, which is his divine soul. If you can't see that, you can't judge him at all. And to judge here is kamuvan, to help him get out of where he is. V'itbonanta mekomo ve'inenu. And then he will cease to exist. The evil in him is replaced, it's pushed away by the fact that you judged him lekav zchut, that you judged him in a positive way, that you see the ikar, which is his divine soul. And the moment that you see it this way, so says Reb Nachman, that pushes away the possibility of the evil taking over his life, right? Of his nefesh b'mit being the ikar. So this is a beautiful example of sometimes you need havdalah before achna. Right? That especially if somebody is so low, like Reb Nachman was very good at this. And sometimes you can, but it's surprising because sometimes you think that, right, that you have to talk about how great Hashem is. But that's achna. That's an achna. I talk about how great Hashem is in submission. That brings about submission. But here he didn't tell him how great Hashem is. Well, then you have a divine soul. Just the fact that he woke his divine soul, that was enough to change the man's life from end to end. It's not Tehillim, it's in Likutei Moran Reish Pei Bet. Oh, maybe. Okay. So, from this, what I originally wanted to talk about, and it became too big a topic, was more about the three klipot. And
You were saying
subduing, like it's me and my animal soul. The separation is the divine.
It's the divine soul.
Sweetness.
And the sweetening is already uplifting the negative of the animal soul and sweetening it, making it also contribute to the goodness in life. That's already a healing process.
Uplifting the divine soul?
No, the animal soul. And the bad qualities in the animal soul suddenly turn out to be something positive. Okay. So I wanted to talk more about the 3 klipot. First of all, I have to make a correction. So last week, all of them. We know that there are 3 gimel klipot atmot, there are 3 impure husks, or I guess peels, or whatever you want to call them. What they have in common is that they're empty, is that they're only a shell on the outside, and there's nothing on the inside. To say it another way, is that a person goes through life and he's contributing a tremendous amount to these shells, but eventually when the time comes to see what the value of life was, he suddenly realizes that was all empty, that there's nothing inside. I contributed and built it, but there was nothing being created on the inside. It doesn't give birth. If you want, another way of thinking of it is an empty egg. It's like the egg has already been, its yolk has been sucked out, it was never there. And so it can't give birth.
So the pure, the noble ones have something inside, and it depends what you're going to do. You have the unclean people, and you have the 3 other people.
Right. So the klipat noga is that it has something inside, but you have to, as it were, to change it, to bring it to holiness. But this is a huge topic. So first of all, I have to make a correction from last week, that I said that Beirut was one of the first universities, and it was wrong. It was one of the first law schools in the Roman Empire. Beirut. It wasn't a university, it was a school of law.
So you were saying that, so there's 3 different theological
Right. And the 3 theological centers were so there's a lot of different opinions about them, but the first 3 were Salamanca. That was the first one, and you can see how that worked out, because the Inquisition came out of Salamanca. They were founded in 1134.
It's in Spain?
In Spain, right. Salamanca is even, by some, it's considered to be the twin city, if you want, in the Klipa of Yerushalayim.
Really?
It's very beautiful. It's really the other most beautiful city in the world. That's how it's described. I've never been there, but that's how they describe it. And then the next 2, so there's a little bit of confusion between them. They're very close one to another. Are Bologna, as they say, in also Spain,
No, it's Italy.
Italy, and Oxford. And I said Paris and Oxford and Beirut. That's not. So Beirut, first of all, is much earlier, much earlier. We're talking about the year 300 and something, that it became a law school, and it was a law school for 3 centuries until it was destroyed. That was where basically Roman law was. Most of the lawyers, most of the judges for most of the Eastern Roman Empire came from there. And then they had another one, obviously, in Rome, but I couldn't find the 3rd one. I know there was a 3rd one. I don't remember.
Beirut, like it as in Beirut?
Yeah. Beirut used to be a very big center of the Roman Empire. Okay, anyway, but universities that started from schools of theology, obviously in the Roman Empire, theology wasn't the thing they studied, but law was. So in terms of universities, there's Salamanca, Bologna, and Oxford. And some say that Cambridge is also involved, and as we'll see, Alexandria in Egypt is also. So Alexandria is not a university. It's not clear to me exactly how it got into the whole mishmash here. Okay, why did we even mention this? Because we said that each one of them represents a one of the three klipot, basically. So we had 4 here. So we have to decide which ones we want to keep and which ones we don't. So the way it's usually presented is that these 3 klipot, they in the end become the 3 big mortal sins, if you want, of Avodah Zarah, Gilui Arayot, and Shfichut Damim. And which is which here? And where did this all come from? Where did this whole thing, where did it start? So amazingly, the beginning of this whole story is in Adam and Rishon. Maybe not so amazing, maybe that's where we would expect it to be. And here we get into a very disturbing topic, which is first Eve, right? That there is a first Eve and a second Eve.
Right.
And that all the klipot start from the first Eve. What was the first Eve? So there's a number of different explanations for them. The simplest, the pshat of it, how do I know that there are, how does the Arizal know, how did anybody know that there's 2 Eves?
What's her name again?
Lamed, Lilith, became her name. But her first name was Eve, Chava. So how do we know that she existed? Because the name Eve only appears twice in the entire Tanakh. They're both in the story of creation, which is mentioned twice, that's it. So from this they learned that there must have been 2 of them. But it's more than that, because when Adam wakes up, what does he say? Zu hapam etzem atzamai ubasar mibsari. So what is he saying? He's saying that this time, zu hapam, this time, she is both, I'm adding the word both, but you'll see why it belongs there. Etzem atzamai, a bone from my bones, and flesh from my flesh. That the first Eve wasn't made from his flesh. She was bone from his bone. Okay? And what does it say? Vayikach Elokim et hatzela vayisgor basar tachtena. That God took the side, and we'll see in a moment what the side means, and he closed it with flesh.
What about the second one?
That was about the second one. The first one wasn't made from Adam's flesh. She was made from the same bone, but not from the same flesh.
So which one is the L?
Which one is the first one? The one was made out of bones.
Yeah.
And what do you see here? That she is entirely equal to him. Why? She has the same etzem that he does. Etzem means the essence.
Right.
That their essence is the same. She really is the source of feminism.
Yeah.
Okay. But which has to be rectified. But that didn't work out because he wasn't able to communicate with somebody who was his complete equal. So he banished her. He threw her out of the home. So Hashem had to
They
put.
weren't attached, I suppose.
They weren't. They were equal. They were never like that. He felt that she was a piece of him. They were made the same way.
Is that his ego? Even then?
Said it. You say that.
And his.
Maybe hers also.
What happened to her with meaning he sent her away?
Took the ego, they went with clothing.
What does this
Hmm?
force really mean?
Oh, so where did she go? So it says that why is she called by her name? Because she's constantly crying.
Isn't she somewhere in this?
In the deserts, it says. She constantly yells. Miyalelet is the word. That's her name. Laila Mamilel. It's like that night is crying out. It's not just when you think about it, there's so much of the imagery that, or the symbols that you hear later from witchcraft. And basically, what was witchcraft? The way it's understood today is very interesting. And that's how the Torah says it. Machshefa lo techayeh. It doesn't say mechashef lo techayeh. You're not allowed to be a mechashef also. But when it talks about it, it's machshefa. It's the feminine. And the way it's understood now, I mean, all the modern studies are that the witches were actually women who didn't want to live in a patriarchal society. They didn't want to be married to a man who would tell them what to do. So what were they seen as? I don't know what else they did, but at least the minimum was that they caused a lot of fear in men in the 1600s and the 1700s. And so all the witch trials were really like anti-female trials. There weren't so many warlocks, but there were a lot of witches. And what does she show up as? It's very interesting. So according to Kabbalah, she shows up in two ways. Like to Kabbalah, where do you see her? So Vashti is one of them, and we'll get to that in a second. The first one is she's a cat, feline. It's an incredible thing. Like the image, a cat. If she comes into a civilized area where people live, then she looks like a cat, and it's impossible to miss the way they yell, right? Especially here in Eretz Yisrael. You hear those yells. No, this is what he says. That they yell. Their yell is completely different than how they normally sound, right? When you, I understand. It's also when they're sometimes it can be two males also, and they're just angry at each other. But the interesting thing is he identifies all the cats. He doesn't say it's the female cats, the Yarizo. He doesn't say these are just these just the female cats. It's all the cats. They have this in them, right? They're feminine. Okay? It's like there's something. It's an incredible thing. What is the other thing? This is even more amazing because if I wouldn't know, like about the Salem witch trials and stuff like that, I would never figure this one out. But he says the other one is they come as geese.
Really?
Yeah, black geese or white
This is also
geese.
the Ari?
Okay, they're geese. How does he get the geese? So he says this is the Rashi Tevos. It's the initials of Esther Vashti Zeresh. Avaz.
She was a Shindai from Esther, I guess.
So we have to think about what did Esther do. It says that Esther was never really with Chashverosh. She sent her. She had a shin daled that she sent every night, but she was really with Mordechai. So what is this saying?
That remained that way at the end as well?
Ken, she was never with him. She was always with Mordechai, and the shin daled went to. The shin daled is the lamed yud taf. It's the same thing, because it says that she gives birth to all the shadim and lilin. They're called. There's just that the shin daled are the male side, and the lilin are the female side. But what is this saying? It's a very interesting thing. It's saying, in the same way the Chava was the first one and the second one, that every great woman has two women in her. That's what it's saying. Oh, you're already way ahead of us. You're already way ahead.
No, but there was two positive ones. You don't talk about two positive.
Hold on.
The revealed and the concealed.
Right.
The veil
With the concealed, or like one that is evil and one that is.
No, again, the evil here is not related. The Rizal doesn't talk about her being evil. He says that really what happens is that once he threw her out, then she fell down. But she wasn't evil to begin with. It was just that she was his equal. And he couldn't stand it. He couldn't relate to it.
He has the ability to throw her out.
What?
How come he can do that?
Apparently, because he's stronger.
I guess so.
I don't know. I guess.
Maybe probably you're right.
But you see that at some level.
She was made from
In a
more
marriage.
refined
Well,
material.
say more that we'll see in a second more and more, but to say it in a way that I'll have to fix it later, is that she has the root of negativity inside. There is a root of something there that is more negative. How do I see that? Where do I see that? That before Eve, there were two other sins of the feminine side. The first one was the earth that gave forth fruit or trees where the tree itself and the fruit had different taste. You can eat the tree, whereas Hashem had said, make the tree also like the fruit, so that it could be eaten. And the earth didn't want to do this for some reason. And the second one is more problematic. It's called the mi'uta levana, the lessening of the moon. That the moon came and said, how can two kings be with the same crown? She wouldn't accept the equality. So it's interesting that it's saying that at the essence it's really not him somehow. We'll have to figure this one out. What does it mean that it's not really the male? It's the female that doesn't want to have equality. One way of saying it is that it's not that she doesn't want equality in the sense that she dafka wants to be the head.
Right.
Maybe she wants him to be the head. She says it's not good, so it doesn't work. Like there's something submissive inside that says, I'd rather be under you than be above you.
It's not clear.
It's not clear. It's not clear. But it would answer why he had the power to vanquish her and she didn't have the power to vanquish him, because it's like saying that inside there's already this state of being depressed. It's very interesting. That
Female, is that a female trait?
it's like a female trait to be depressed. It's a feminine trait to be lower. So, what? The simple idea, it doesn't take too much, I think, to understand it, is that the feminine has this quality of being more down to earth. That's why you call it Mother Earth. You don't call it Father Earth. She has this quality of being down to earth, which also means that at least at first sight, you don't see that the earth is divine. You see that the divine is somehow in the heavens. And so you're far away, you feel far away, you feel longing. And if you're not able to fulfill that longing in any way, then you become depressed. Basically, depression is a state of feeling my own grief, of feeling everything's terrible, right? So I guess she has some kind of natural inclination towards that. It says that mashpil enosh ad daka. The word depression in Hebrew is dikaon. So where does dikaon come from? Of course, it comes from the word daka in Tehillim. Mashpil enosh ad daka. That Hashem brings man down all the way to daka. What is this daka? So it's not very clear, but it's a low place. Dikaon means to be in a low place. But Chazal say that daka is an acronym for three things: dira, kelim, isha.
What was the first one?
Dira, my house, my kelim, my vessels, and my wife, isha.
So it should be a men thing.
No, so she's already there in the daka.
What does that mean?
Low, to a low
The
place.
breaking point, sometimes it's translated into Hillam.
Okay, I didn't know they translated that.
So, as a breaking point?
We say from dechi to dechi, from lower to lower place.
Yeah.
Okay, so now, who is she relative to second Eve? So, taking a step back, we have this first Eve and second Eve. What's the difference between them? You already said it. Rachel and Leah are the next example of first and second Eve. And from that you see that Adam says that the face of Yaakov was like the face of Adam Rishon. So he also had two wives. And as we'll see in a moment, that it's not just that, he also has two other wives who are the sisters, the half-sisters of these first wives, and they're their servants, but then they become his wives also.
That helped rectify it somehow.
Right, we'll see in a second how it helped rectify. So relatively speaking, this we also said already, that Leah and first Eve are the same, they're very tall, it says. Tall means that they go all the way up to the mind. That they're in the intellect, they're in the Chabad. And she's the Bina, specifically. Specifically, she's the Bina, but in general, she's all the intellect. And that's what makes somebody equal, when you think about it. Right? If you have to, it's called topping from the bottom. If you have to be on top from the bottom, it's without the intellect. If you're with the intellect, so you're topping from the top. You're on top of somebody from the top of your head, not from being underneath. There are people who can control from underneath, and that's why a lot of relationships don't work, because not really equal. It's another way that relationships don't work. I'm not saying it's the only one, but that people feel manipulated. Because really we're not equal, but you're finding a way from below me to force me to do something that I don't want to do. So that's Rachel, that's the second Eve. She's submissive, she's underneath, but sometimes she can be controlling. But the real controlling, the real being eye to eye and being equal, is if she's tall, like first Eve, like Leah. And then she's equal to him in his thought. Specifically, she's equal in her understanding of Hashem. She's equal in her understanding of Torah.
But then why would Yaakov love Rachel? What was that detail?
He can love her all he wants, but the Mashiach comes from Leah.
No one knows his.
That's his first love.
Yeah.
That's like love at first sight. But the real, it's almost like saying that we see this a lot, that there are men who say, I don't want a woman who's like me. Right? This is definitely true in the previous generation, but it's still true. So I want somebody who will just be like Rachel, beautiful and
In the kitchen, or in the bedroom.
kind of very practical. That's what I want. I don't want somebody who's a thinker. What do I do with a thinker? We'll think all day together. We'll think, and then the house will fall apart.
There'll be no dinner.
There'll be no dinner. There will be nothing. So that's like that Yaakov falls in love. You fall in love with the woman who's beautiful and is practical. She comes with these sheep. You see, she's practical. What was Leah? Leah was with her books somewhere, learning. So the simple explanation is that she cried. But another explanation is she was with the books, and slowly her eyesight got worse.
That's what I heard.
Maybe. And Yatzanit. Right.
It's more social with people.
Let's face it, that Dina that she went out.
Right.
Right, Yatzanit.
So how does that
Like her
follow
mother,
through to the end?
Molachin.
Right.
Shmoleh. So what do we get from this? So we get from this that first Eve is intellectual. She can learn. She's his equal. That's why I said that really you have to rectify this. That of course that's the end game. Of course that's what it needs to come to. The question is how do you do? So Leah rectified it. But as much as she rectified it, she also had to have she and Rachel. Because in the end they're one woman. So if a woman is to retain holiness, this is the idea that if she can to be able to retain her holiness in face of the strong intellect, and we'll see in a moment why this intellect is problematic, so she has to have a buffer in between her and the rest of the world. And those are the two shvachot, Bilhah and Zilpah. So now we're getting into a whole another topic, which is that that the mind always needs a buffer to retain holiness at some level. And I'll explain what I mean. Let's say that a person is learning Torah and he's dedicated his life to Torah, and that's all that he does. And suddenly comes along somebody who tells him, why are you wasting your life? You could be enjoying yourself. You could be doing other things. And so then he has to have something to stop him from falling into that world of just pure enjoyment, of tanugot, of just pursuing my bodily needs. So it says that in the middle there has to be, like the Rambam says, science in the sense of rakachot v'tabachot. That in the middle you have to have some human, logical arguments for why this is the wrong way to live. You have to have some kind of, the problem with science today, that it doesn't necessarily give that. But in the time of the Rambam, think about how science used to be. That there were the men of science, and then there were the theologians. And that was the order. Meaning there were the simple people, the men of science, and then the theologians. There was the simple person, and then somebody who knew Hashem through the mind, and finally somebody who knew Hashem through the Torah. That was the highest. But the Torah was certainly on top. A theologian, whether he was Jewish or not, was always on top. And then there were these men of science who, maybe they weren't theological so much, but they were, call it, for the advancement of the human condition, right? That they're not willing to let a human being fall down to just be an animal that looks to fulfill its needs. It's not just about survival. We have more to us. So there's this buffer. The real role that science is supposed to play is it's supposed to play a buffer between the Torah and the animal world.
The intellectual soul.
So, exactly. So how does this work in us? That we have a divine soul and an animal soul, but in the middle you need a buffer, which is the intellectual soul. And the intellectual soul is like science. It's exactly like that. Not like, it is science. It means that I have to be able to explain to myself, like the Rebbe Rashab wrote, any Inyan in Torah, if I can't find a topic in Torah that I can't find for it, at least two parables, two analogies, one in natural science and the other in psychology, I don't understand it yet. That's how he writes it. That I have yet to be able to understand what the Torah is telling me. Why do I need to build my intellectual soul? Because otherwise the gap between the divine and the animal is too big. And if I ever fall down from the divine, for whatever reason it be, first of all, there might not be a way to climb back up. But even more than that, I need something to brace the fall, to stop on the way. Meaning that even if I don't do it because Hashem told me, I at least have to understand why in the world this is not the right thing to do, because it's just not right. It just doesn't work. This is not what being a human is about. So it's like being an outstanding person, just being an upright person, being a mensch, what we call being a mensch. Derech eretz kadma laTorah. Really, derech eretz here is that.
Can someone get stuck in the intellectual soul?
That's what we're saying here is really that first Eve, because she's so intellectual, so it's her it's a person exactly when he's stuck with her, that he's not able to progress anywhere else. He stays stuck with.
So I thought she would be dafka more in the divine.
No, why would she be more? She fell.
Because you keep
He gets her out. So now
But she wasn't. She was stuck in the intellectual. Then it felt like
she is intellectual. She's his equal. She's his equal. But he threw her out, and then she fell, and then she became. It's called chachamim em le'ara. She uses all her intellect only to serve the animal soul. That's why she becomes herself like an animal. She shows up as a cat, as a goose, as an avaz.
Parable of Leah and Rachel,
But
right? That
Moshe
Moshe-
is coming from.
But
Moshe is coming
Mashiach,
from
when
the-
she's rectified, so Mashiach comes specifically from her, from the intellect. He doesn't come from the practicality of Rachel. In the end, he comes from her, from the intellect.
So what is that
Where,
for?
meaning that he comes from a house where the husband and wife are equal. He has to come from that kind of. He can't come from a house where the husband is the intellect and the wife is Rachel. She's
Or
like,
as Rabbi Ginsburg said, a couple.
okay,
Right.
what do you mean?
Did he say it would be a couple?
Okay, good. Like, said that also. Yeah, his wife is also the same way with him. That's why he doesn't leave her, because it doesn't. Okay, so it's a tremendous teaching that's how. Okay, so what does this have to do anything with psyche? So I said that today science has fallen down. That instead of serving as a buffer, as an intellectual soul, that to learn science should be, or to learn logic, to learn mathematics should be the servant that's keeping the divine soul where it is, that's showing that the divine is even higher. So it's become something very negative. What happened to it? So what I wanted to talk about is how it affects, and you could say that these are the klipot. The klipot that affected, because it's not connected to Torah, so it fell. Science fell. Well, I wanted to explain what it means that it fell, and what it means psychologically to people. And the mistakes that we make, or that psychology in general it tends to make when dealing with people, when looking at them, and not being able to look at them in the right way. Okay, so to get to the source of these klipot, and how they've fallen down, like how this knowledge has fallen down, become a klipa. So this is a little, it's a little scientific. But hopefully it's not too difficult. Hopefully not too difficult. I'll be able to explain it. There's a famous letter from the Rebbe about the 4 problems with evolution. And really, the issue with science today, when science became anti-religious, when it stopped serving its purpose, is since evolution. Before then, it wasn't a problem. There was nothing that directly contradicted anything, and certainly didn't put into question anything. And evolution did the job. Really, it's not by mistake that the biggest atheist, they call them the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. There's 4 writers in English that became the proponents of modern atheism. So one of them already died, Christopher Hitchens. He used to write columns, but he also wrote a book. And there's even just now I saw in Eichal Menachem, there's a book called God Setting the Record Straight. So he, somebody from Detroit. He's a lawyer, but he's also a Lubavitcher. Maybe he's a Rav somewhere. And he wrote a book where he tries to answer all of Hitchens' questions about God. Some of the answers are good, some of them are not so good. And then the other one is Richard Dawkins, who's pretty famous. And again, these are klipas. You can't deal with them the rest of the year. You have to deal with them now. But I think the deepest of them all, I don't remember who they say is the 4th one, but
Who's the third one?
So the 3rd one is Douglas Dennett.
That was what?
Douglas Dennett. He's a professor at, if I'm not mistaken, University of Chicago.
Dennett?
Yeah, Dennett. And he wrote a book called Darwin's Dangerous Idea. And for him, I'll say it like this: Dawkins is just a biologist. He's a good biologist and he knows a lot, but he's not a philosopher. So he has a lot of things to say, and they're interesting. Some are more interesting, some are less. But he's not a deep thinker. But Dennett is a very deep thinker. He's a real force to. If you're into the world of philosophy, he's a real force that you have to fight with. So when he chose his opus magnum, call it, about modern atheism, so he called it Darwin's Dangerous Idea, and he starts from Darwin, and he says really that modern atheism is not based could not be based if it wasn't for what Darwin did with evolution. So evolution is a real issue. Chemistry is not an issue. Physics certainly isn't an issue. Beyond that, mathematics is even the opposite. I think that mathematics only shows more and more of Hashem's language and face. And like Galileo said, that God wrote nature in the book of nature with mathematics. That's the language.
I'm curious, can you say how not for those who don't understand that thing?
Right. For
beyond
somebody,
grade 12. So how does mathematics just
it's actually in the simple things. It's not the complex mathematics that they do in high school and then in college. It's actually simple things with numbers, the stuff that Rav Yitzchak loves to show. The gematriot, really, and the prime numbers, and these things are they're very simple. It's nothing, but they're so beautiful that it's almost impossible to not be amazed by it. There was something he did just last week, and I'll probably repeat it in the review next Sunday. He did this thing with what's called hexagonal numbers, which we call misparei Shabbat numbers. And they have these qualities that the first person who saw them was besides himself for a year. He said, "I'm seeing God. There's no other explanation for how this could be. There's no reason for it to happen, for what this shows. But what it shows is so beautiful. It's so stunning that you're like, how did Hashem do this? Because it's not anywhere else. It's like suddenly, it's like when you see a beautiful, beautiful gem, or you see a beautiful face, you can't say, this is what Hashem looks like. This is what Hashem shows me." 1, 7, 19, 30, 37, 61, 91, and goes on.
What's hexagonal about it? You said they're hexagonal?
Because they're hexagons. They're hexagons one after another, and there's a point in the middle. So the first one is 7. The first one really is 1, and then there's 7. 7 is Shabbat, the 7th day. By the way, Chava 19 is a hexagonal number also.
Because why?
Because if you do, after the 7, you do another 12. So 7 plus 12 equals 19. The next ring will have 12 points in it.
How many sides? Hexagonal?
6 sides to it.
There's always 6 sides?
Right, and a point in the middle. So the formula is 6 times the triangle of n plus 1. So now important. So let me say, so the Rebbe wrote a letter early on to explain the 4 major problems with evolution.
Was he answering someone's question?
What?
Was he answering someone's question?
I think he was,
Okay.
but it doesn't say who. This is one of the letters that I don't know why they took out the name of the person that was asking it. And the first problem that he said is that it's speculative and not empirical. Science cannot be speculative.
You're talking about the famous letter from the Rebbe?
Yeah, it's a famous letter, and he brings out 4 points. The first thing is that the problem, evolution is entirely speculative. There's nothing empirical about it. And this is a big deal because, they try to show that, we'll see in a moment, they try to show that evolution now exists. That things are still evolving, which is fine. You could show that from now on. But speculation means here, first and foremost, that you've never seen one species develop out of another. That has not occurred yet. Nobody's been able to document something like that. And science has to be empirical. You have to be able to observe things. You can't just say, I interpret this to mean such and such happened. You have to actually see it happening. It has to be live in front of you. You can't do it by proxy in some other way. So that's the first problem. The second problem, he says, that evolution uses extrapolation instead of interpolation. What is it? What is extrapolation? First of all, what interpolation is. If I know that between, say, 40 degrees, or do it even easier, from between 10 and 30 degrees, water is a liquid, I can say that at 20 degrees it's probably a liquid also. That's speculative. I don't have to, there's a speculation here. But if I speculate, it can only be within the range that I've already documented. So I've seen that at 10 degrees it's liquid. I've seen that at 30 degrees it's liquid. Same thing, if I have seen that at 100 degrees it becomes a vapor, and at 200 degrees it's a vapor, it doesn't turn into anything else, I can speculate or I can interpolate and say, it's an interpolation, it's not a speculation, because I do have the two borders, the two boundaries. I can say that within those boundaries, it acts the same way. That's interpolation. But evolution, it uses extrapolation. It's taking a known range, and then it's telling me what happened outside the range. Completely outside the range. So he says, the Rebbe writes, some extrapolation is even acceptable. For instance, if I say, I've seen what water does between 100 and 200 degrees, and now I'll say what it does at 210, no mele. 10 degrees is not such a big jump. But to say I have documentation over, let's say, 100 years, and now I'm going to tell you what happened 3 billion years ago, that you can't. There's no logical basis for that. Absolutely not. So that's not scientific. That's the second main problem.
The problem is that simple people don't know science
Right.
to begin with.
Right.
So they will
Uh-huh.
they'll take the scientific check-in and say they're saying.
But that's one of my questions. How come the scientists do get told?
So,
Theory.
Why don't they argue with it?
the third problem, he says, is that even when you do extrapolation, like I said, you can go further. You can't go backwards.
That's the third one.
What's the example? He says, if I know that my end result is the number 4. Here's an example. If you tell me that I started out with 2 and 2, two number 2s, so I can extrapolate out. I can say that either 2 and 2 plus 2 became 4. Okay. Or I might be able to say, if I had 2 and 2, maybe I did 2 minus 2 and I got 0. Or it could be that I had 6 minus 2. If I know the starting conditions, I can tell you where we're going. At least at some level, I can know where we're going. But his example, again, is that I have 4. And he says, even if you told me that the starting conditions involve 2 and 2, that wouldn't be enough to tell me how I got to 4. It's not enough. Why? Because what's missing? What's another possibility if I had 2 and 2? Somebody would come to me and say, look, the end result was 4. The effect was 4. The causes were 2 and 2.
1 and 3.
Let me tell you what just happened. No, the 1 and 3 weren't there. It's just 2 and 2. So, what's 1 out? So it says, it has to be that what you did was you added 2 and 2. That's what happened there. They were added together. And that's how you got 4. He says, that's wrong. Why is that wrong? Because there's another possibility. What's the other possibility? That I multiplied them. That I did 2 times 2. I didn't do 2 plus 2. I actually multiplied. And because so you don't know what was involved in the causes, even if you have all the constituents. Even if you show me all the materials that went into something, you don't know how it produced what it produced. This all seems very far from psychology, but hold on, you'll see where it's going.
What is this one called?
That if you extrapolate, you can only extrapolate forwards, you can't extrapolate backwards. I can't tell you from the effect, even if I know the causes, I can't tell you what happened to them. There's no way of knowing. But if you give me 2 plus 2, I know it's going to become 4. If you give me starting conditions right now, and you tell me this and this process is happening, so it makes some sense to say this is what will happen in the end. Of course you don't know, because it could be that you did 2 plus 2, and then a 3 came along and suddenly it became 4/3, because you divided by 3 then. So but at least we have some idea of where you're going.
Can I add something about what you said, that we cannot, or the references can go
Backwards.
So if we take it into therapy, when I
Yeah.
hear the people saying, we know what happened to you, and
Right.
in the this and in the, so if I-
You're already way
I've
ahead.
been listening to, I was talking to someone about another shita, and I'm saying, okay, the Arizal might say that, what's your name?
You're way ahead. Okay, hold on. We'll get to that.
That's part 2.
That's already way ahead. Okay. The 4th problem, he says, and this is already like way out there, because most people won't agree with this one, but he says it's a very simple problem, that if you're a little bit suspicious, you should have this question. And he says, how do you know that nature has been constant over the last such and such amount of time? I mean, they're assuming, the biggest assumption here is that nature is constant, the laws are constant, the constants are constant, the way things work is constant, right, the laws. But who tells you that? How do you know? Because that's speculation, you don't know. So the scientists will come tell you, well, if I can't assume that, there is no science. Right? With that, this is the only one that scientists will have a real issue with. Because they'll say, if you take that away from me, so there's no science, who knows? Okay, what's that? But the Rebbe says this is a real issue, because you can't know. For instance, he doesn't necessarily mean that it was, in the whole universe it was different. He says maybe there were conditions that caused things to be different for a while.
Well, the marbles.
The marbles, an example.
To say carbon dating only goes back as far as the marble. But then before that, the conditions were different, so you can't say anything is older than
Really, again, if you don't want to use speculation, then you can't even know anything before carbon dating started. Meaning, what is carbon dating? It's the ratio of carbon-14 to carbon-12 in the atmosphere. There's a certain ratio that exists now. And when an animal is alive, it breathes the atmosphere. So that ratio is what it has inside its body. To every, let's say, 50 carbon-12 atoms, it has 1 carbon-14. But when the animal dies and it's no longer exchanging carbon with the environment, so carbon has half-life, very short half-life, 5,700 years actually. What happened? What does that mean? That every 5,700 years, half of the carbon-12 will turn into, half of the carbon-14 will turn back into carbon-12. Okay? So if you measure the ratio and you see how it's, let's say I find an animal and there the ratio, instead of being 50 to 1, is a half to 50, meaning or 1 to 100 instead. So I know that this animal died 5,700 years ago, at least that's the theory, because it's been cut down in half. If I have this 1 to 200, so it's already twice that amount, right? And keep going. So if you measure, that's what's called carbon dating. You measure the ratio of carbon-14 to carbon-12. And it's very easy to do it, or at least they say it's easy. I've never seen it done, but they say it's quite easy to do. In any case, how do you know that the ratio of carbon-14 to carbon-12 in the atmosphere, I'm not talking about the half-life. Half-life, okay, except it's 5,700 years. It's been this way for forever. But how do you know the ratio in our atmosphere has been constant? There could be a million reasons why you wouldn't be constant. Okay? I don't know what they are, but again, it's speculative. You can't tell. Okay, so these 4 problems, really, they're not problems.
Can I tell you that I wanted to add that, and maybe you can relate to that. I heard a rabbi that I really like when he said, at the end of the day, I don't have a problem with evolution, but I want them to tell them why certain monkeys stayed monkeys and some of them became who we are, and moral decisions, and if we were potatoes or we were monkeys, I don't have a problem with that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have a way of but tell me why these monkeys at the zoo stayed like that, and I'm looking at them and throwing them peanuts. Like, so that's why it's not really a problem.
So I'll tell you what it means that not really problems. Really, each of these problems is only a problem when everything falls down. Then all the worlds fall down. Like Chava, first Chava. When she falls down, in her pristine state, they're not a problem, as you'll see in a minute. And when she falls down, then they start becoming problems. It's like the mind is out of its place. It's doing something that it shouldn't be doing. How do we understand this? The first problem of being speculative versus being empirical is a problem in the world of Asiya. It's a problem in the world of action. In the world of action, the practical world, you have to be empirical. You can't be speculative. If somebody tells me, well, I think I changed your brakes, but I'm not really sure. So I'm not going to take the car out of the shop, right? Because the world of action, I'm very happy for all your svaros and that you learned and whatever, but in the end I need brakes. So I don't need speculation about the brakes, whether they're good, I don't know, it's a new brand. I need something that works. I need empiricism. That's how the world of action works. So you can't be speculative at that level of reality. On the other hand, it's okay for you to be speculative if, well, first we'll finish with the world, then I'll explain what happens when they go up. The second issue we said is interpolation, extrapolation. What does that mean? It means that you have to stay within bounds. Right? We said within the bounds you can say everything that's going on within bounds. If you measure it here and here, you can say everything that's going on in between. To take things out of bounds doesn't work for the world of Yetzirah. And here's where we're starting to get more psychological, and you'll see it more and more as we go up. In the world of Yetzirah, things have to be the world of the Yetzarim, which is really the most, you can call it the most psychological, the most challenging part of our psyche. In that world, things have to be clearly defined. They have to be bound. They have to be identified well. I'll give you an example. If your identity is not clear to you, it's very hard for you to function. So, for instance, the gender issues are now creeping into reality. Right? That it's not clear to you where you stand. If it's not clear to you if you're a Jew or not a Jew, if it's not clear to you whether you're frum or not frum, if it's not clear to you you're Vavitch or something else. And this is called the world of Katnut. It's Chanoch. It's the when you're young. It's Chanoch lanar al pi dorko. Gam ki yaskin lo yasu mimena. That when you're young, these boundaries have to be well placed. And if they're not, or if for some reason they're broken, they're not well developed, then a person's sense of identity is lost. And then it's hard for them to function. So extrapolation is like breaking boundaries in the world of Yetzirah, the world of formation. Or like, say it another way, that today there are these psychologists that they accept the fact that misgender, it's okay. Or you can be homosexual, it's okay. There's nothing wrong with you. It's a choice. But they don't understand, or at least they're not willing to live with the meaning of a lack of boundaries, a lack of good definition. Once you have good definition, you can start playing around. But you can't do that, meaning in childhood you have to set up something that's working. And later on you can be open. You can be open to a lot of things. But you have to be very clear on who you are. So if you're a Lubavitcher, or you're a Jew, or you're Frum, so in young age, until you grow up, when you're still in the world of formation, things have to be very clear. Once they're clear, and you receive mochin, which is already the next world up, then you can also play with your boundaries. It's okay. You can definitely play with them. It's not like, but you have to be older and able to fall back on something in order to be able to play with your boundaries.
What's an example of playing with your boundaries?
So if you're a Lubavitcher, you don't just read the Likutei Sichos. You can learn Me'ashilach. Nothing will happen to you. You become wider. You understand. I have my identity. I know who I am. That's cool. Does it do it by itself? You need a segue.
I need room. I need space.
You want the chair also?
At the same time.
Or you have to stand?
Things have to be addressed for certain children then.
What?
There can be very clear boundaries in a home, and certain children have a very hard time.
Right? So maybe you have to expand the boundaries.
Address them when they're.
But there have to be boundaries. Maybe you expand them some more. But try to keep them included within boundaries. If they completely rebel to the point where they leave the boundaries, so therapy has to be to try to convince somebody to come back. If you can't, you can't. There's no secret sauce that'll make somebody accept the boundaries. I'm saying what the ideal is.
Everybody that has identity crisis, did you have boundaries as a child? We can't, I don't know that we can say that.
Identity crisis means I don't have boundaries. I don't know whether it was caused by the parents not giving boundaries.
That's what I'm saying.
Or by something else. It could be that this person is hard to contain. It's hard for them to contain
Or they
themselves.
need more strict boundaries even when they're
Or maybe
older.
they need even stricter. Maybe they need more time. Maybe they need less time. It could be a variety of things. But what grows the same thing when you write in a mashtela, in a nursery for trees. How do you grow them in the beginning? Very small containers, because it's good for them. It's not. Then once they've sprouted and they become stronger and so on, then you can move them into regular earth, and they'll spread however they want. They won't turn from a orange tree into an apple tree, but they can become pretty big and maybe other things.
We have to leave the children. I mean, talking most Jews. I mean, I shouldn't say most Jews, but we have a lot of problems with identity, so we have a lot of problems.
Right. Right. It all starts from the fact that the parents don't know who they are. If I don't know who I am, how could my children know who they are? I'm not saying that they have to turn out like me. Again, if they grow up well, so they could go in a completely different direction. But the basis, in the same way that I don't raise my children in the street, it's the same thing. Just as my physical self needs its boundaries, it needs its four walls, it needs its space. And again, we talked about whether it needs its own bed or needs its own room. That's a different question. But it needs to feel that here we are contained.
This is our home, and this is
Okay? This is in, this is out. If you don't have that in the psyche, if it's not built well, physically and psychologically, so yes, the person becomes what we call Yeled Rechov. Yeled Rechov have a problem. Street children, kids that grow up on the street have a problem.
So we might be street children emotionally or spiritually.
Right? They might be like that. The parents might be like that without even knowing.
Yeah.
Okay. So the extrapolation is a problem in Yetzirah, but it's not a problem. Hold on. I said we'd wait until. Okay. The third one is in Bria. Bria, creation, so there we have extrapolation that can go forward, but it can't go back. And this is only a problem, this is the problem in Bria, because in Bria, I have cause and effect. It's the world of cause and effect. It's the intellectual world. And in the world of cause and effect, you can't go backwards, like we just showed. That was the example. But it's a problem in the world of cause and effect. The fourth one, that maybe nature changes all the time, that's a problem in Atzilut. Why is it a problem in Atzilut? Because when you say that nature is constant, Hashem can't change it, that's not Atzilut. That goes against Atzilut, where Hashem is everything. What do you mean? Nature is a shadow. It's one reflection of Hashem. If Hashem chooses to change nature, it won't change. If you're in the world of Atzilut, there's no miracles. Of course there are. In the world of action, I'm not going to count on miracles. I'm not going to put no brakes on my car because I can trust miracles. Mm-hmm. But in the world of Atzilut, of course there are miracles. At that level of consciousness, if you're living at that level, so of course there's something called a miracle. Now what's the real issue here? That all the worlds fell. And that if you push each one of these problems up one world, it's no longer a problem. It's an incredible thing. They fell because, again, this is all how the mind thinks. This is all the nefilah of first Chava. And she's the intellect, and the intellect fell. And so it's using assumptions that are wrong for the level that they're at. But if they wouldn't have fallen, they would be fine. They would be just dandy. No problems. So let's see from top to bottom this time. If you're in Atzilut, so we said you can't say that nature is always universal because Hashem controls it. But Atzilut was really, again, in first Chava, before she fell, Atzilut was Adam Kadmon. It was primordial man. And about primordial man, it says that he sees from the beginning of the world to the end of the world. So everything is in front of him. And it says that what he sees is the whole plan of history, everything that will happen. When you see it all, it's all been already defined. So there's no changes from the plan, there's no deviations. As far as Adam Kadmon is concerned, the plan never changes.
Why it doesn't change? Because he sees from the beginning.
Because he sees from beginning to end. He knows what the purpose is. And that's the plan. It's a reflection of Shi'er B'atzmo B'koach Kol Mashatil Liot B'fa'al. It's a reflection of God saying, this is the purpose of reality. This is why I'm creating reality. So he knows this. For him, there's no changes. And then if you assume that, it's great. Then that assumption in evolution is fine. No problems with it.
Because even if it changes form or something else, what is it?
There's no changes. What is it? It's a reflection of Hashem himself. In Adam Kadmon, there's no difference between nature and between God. It's the same thing. They're both constant. They're both universal in the same way. Why? Because nature is just one of the parts of Hashem's plan. And just as Hashem doesn't change his mind, nature doesn't change. Period. It's all natural. So then we would say, what's the miracle? There are no miracles. When Hashem created the world, okay, this is the way that it's thought about. The Ralbag says this, like a rationalist. How would he approach this? He would say, when Hashem created the world, he created it with such laws that at this and this time and this day, there's an exception to the way it usually works. And then Kriyat Yam Suf is not a miracle in the sense that Hashem now changed something, because he doesn't change anything. It was built into the system. It was built into that. It's like a computer program that in this and this day, it's going to show you suddenly a new message. You've never seen it before. You'll never see it again. Period.
It's just a different definition of a miracle.
But it's a different definition. But with this definition, I don't need nature to change. I can keep nature constant, and I can be a rationalist. It's very easy. It's problem solved. This is the approach that the Ralbag takes, Rabbi Levi ben Gershon. And it's the approach that a lot of the rationalist philosophers in Yiddishkeit took.
Who takes this?
Ralbag, he's very big on this. Really, what is he telling us? He's telling us, I live in the world of Adam Kadmon. And for me, my consciousness is there. And for me, it's just easy. There's no real miracles in the sense of God changing his mind. It was all planned. Period. What about going backwards in time? So because if I would lift that, it fell, but if I lift it back to its origin, where it really was, in Atzilut. In Atzilut, there's no time. There's only Seder Zmanim. There's no time.
Right. Which is not
You go forwards or backwards, it's all the same thing. Somebody who's in Atzilut, he has no problem going backwards, the same as much as he goes forwards. It's the same thing. That's one of the definitions of Atzilut, that there's no Zmanim there, only Seder Zmanim.
But what does that mean?
Seder Zmanim means that there's an order that things happen, but you can go either way you want. There's no Zman, in the sense like our time, that we're limited by time's directionality, that it's always going forward.
Linear here.
Okay.
And somewhere else.
Linear, but one directional. It's always linear, but it's one direction.
Okay.
In Atzilut, it's not a dimension in the same sense. You can only go forwards.
So that's why they say that
It goes back and
no
forth.
move down and no.
Right. For instance, where do you have to be? In what frame of mind do you have to be in? Atzilut, and there it's fine. So if somebody was looking at the world and saying it's exactly what you could do, read the Torah and you say En mukdam u'meuchar, for instance. So it doesn't bother me that it says that on the fourth day Hashem created the moon and the sun, right? Why? Because En mukdam v'meuchar. It's not a problem. So it says he created something on the fourth day. One of them is called the moon, one is called the sun. Who said that they were created in the order that it says? Maybe they're created in a different order. And there are Mefarshim that go in this direction. They say it doesn't fit, so we'll change the order around. There are klalim to this, and I'm making it a little too easy on them, but in principle, the moment that you can go backwards and forwards in time, so this question of extrapolating backwards is no longer a question. You can extrapolate backwards. It's the same thing as extrapolating forwards. What's the difference? No difference. What about the second thing that we said? Extrapolation, and it should be interpolation. Boundaries.
There's no boundaries in it.
So here we were just going up to Bria. The problem was in Yitzirah, but if you go to Bria, it's not a problem. Why is it not a problem with Bria? This was supposed to be my alarm in the morning, 5:15.
Talking about no time, you're not right?
We woke up anyway, but it was like
Thank God.
You need to wake up now.
apparently.
Something about cause and effect.
So we said about that here it's the boundaries, that you can't go outside the boundaries, but in the world of Bria, the world of the intellect, it's okay to go outside the boundaries. We sort of said it before. We said that once you grow up and you're no longer in Yetzirah, you're already in intellect, you have Mochin. So with Mochin, there's no problem. You can go beyond the boundaries. Seder, maybe, but in principle, we'll see in a moment. What it means is that you won't stop being yourself even if you entertain things that are outside your boundaries in your thought. As long as it doesn't go down into your midot. You can think, what's the example? That I can understand somebody else. But even when I understand them, like as when I'm in therapy, that's what I'm supposed to do. I don't necessarily change because I don't lose my own boundaries, or I shouldn't lose my own boundaries by understanding somebody else. I still have to know who I am. Okay? To be able to expand beyond my limits, that I do through my intellect. So the intellect doesn't have boundaries. there's another thing about it. This is maybe one of the main examples. That in the intellect, I can carry two opposites at the same time. In the midot, in my feelings, I can't.
You would read that with me?
Yeah. In my intellect, I can carry a paradox. I can carry two things at once. The intellect doesn't have this issue, but my feelings do.
Which world is feelings?
Feelings is yitzirah, it's formation, emotions. In my emotions, I can't both love and hate somebody at the same time.
You can't?
You can do it one after another, but you can't do it at the same time.
I thought everybody was in a love-hate relationship.
Sometimes you love, sometimes you
It's
hate,
never at the same
but
time.
it's not at the same time. I'm not like,
Not simultaneous.
if it is, then it's completely whacked. In the intellect, you can certainly hold two things at the same time, mamish at the same time. How do I hold two things at the same time? That I understand the sentence, right? The famous sentence. This sentence is false, right? So the moment I just hold on to it, it's in my mind. I understand it. I also understand why it's a paradox. Even I don't have to carry it out. I've already done it once or twice. I know that it's a paradoxical
This
statement
sentence is false.
Right.
It's a paradox word.
itself,
If you're saying the sentence, it's
right?
Right.
I don't really have to follow through. The first time maybe I have to follow through, but eventually I know I can recognize these sentences as being paradoxical. But more than that, I can see 2 points of view. I can, and when I'm with somebody else, and I'm in therapy with them, so I definitely can go into their mindset, and I continue to hold my mindset. But even more than that, if you want, we talked about this a lot of times, that in a dream or in general, the consciousness splits.
Right.
From the intellect and up, where the consciousness is, in neshamasha b'mochi, which is like the binah, the world of the intellect, there it splits. It can split as many times as you want.
So if a person has the ability to be doing Nesiyat Efrafim all the time, he can. That's why he can do Ladun Kol Adam Lekaf schools, right? And all kinds of like conflicting things that he sees, but he sees like the unity in them.
Right.
I wanted to ask you, like I spoke to
Not-
a person, and I told
Not
him the
necessarily the
paradox, and
unity.
it broke-
No, not necessarily unity. They're different. They're opposites.
Yes,
It's
but
not
you
one
can
thing.
say, you know,
But I hold them in the same place.
Okay, yeah, because you know, even though like let's say Ladun Adam Lekaf school, like it could be someone who's really like is doing something terrible right now, but Ladun Lekaf school, so I don't see the whole thing. Like I have to. But like I was talking to someone.
Or
who-
like, maybe another example, just to finish,
Yeah.
sorry. Like the thief who, at the time that he's going to steal, he calls Hashem to help him.
Nachon.
So if he would just feel it for a moment, he would see that that doesn't work.
Mm.
Like this guy, he called him a tzaddik, he didn't call him a genius. Oh, you must be a genius. Right, the story that we started with. Yeah, exactly. He didn't call him a genius. He called him a tzaddik. Tzaddik is in the world of Yetzirah. It's the maybe part of the world of Yetzirah. And that like doesn't work.
Yeah.
So I have to decide which one am I.
Yeah. He was
But
able to see
if I
the
tell you you're a genius, how you? No, every thief calls out to Hashem. They have no, but it's only because it remains only in the intellect. It doesn't go down into the emotions.
And in
Okay, so
counseling
wait.
and Zubiyot, it's very important to hold it.
Sorry, in
In counseling and Zubiyot.
yeah, right. That was
To
the
hold
example that I skipped over.
Mhm.
Right, that when you see two people together, you have to hold both viewpoints.
Yeah.
You can't be partial to one side or the other. So what are you really trying to do? You're trying to get them to also pull each other together, even though they're so different. So that's couple. It's different. It has to happen. Whereas therapy usually is very emotional. Here you can't involve emotions
Where?
in couples therapy. Whenever there's two people. Whenever there's two people. This morning I told my son, he was very angry at the little one. The 14-year-old was going to hurt the 6-year-old because he did something to him. So I said, what does the Torah tell us about in id nasa dayan? Certainly the Baal Din can't become a dayan. Right? The last thing you're allowed to do is somebody who's involved emotionally, let him become the judge. Because what's he going to do? He's going to kill the other guy. Of course, he's going to. When you're involved emotionally, there's only your side. There's no. But a judge in the seichel, he can see both sides, and he can impartially decide which one is more correct. Okay, now, sorry.
I just want to learn something that happened. Like, I was talking to a relative, and they're saying, we're talking something about on Shabbat, and I said, I wanted to hear their opinion. Because no, I don't want to open my mouth. You're not going to like what I'm going to say. I said, I want to hear it. We can have different opinions. So the person said what they had to say, and they were saying in the same sentence, how do you know what Hashem wants? He doesn't want us to do that. I'm like, you say he doesn't, we don't know what he wants, but you're saying that in the same sentence, he doesn't want us to do that. So I said, so how do you know he doesn't want that? And the person became very frustrated. Was answering okay, and then eventually even it became even a
physiological reaction.
Physiological reaction. And then I'm never going to talk again. It's better to keep my mouth shut, and I'm never going to talk again. And I knew the person had a crisis after that. And I'm saying to myself, maybe we also as I don't know, it's different when you're dealing with someone who's not family as opposed to someone who's family to say you're not going to be able to bear the paradox, and it's gonna it breaks the person.
What's the paradox here, though?
The person was saying that, she was the person was saying to me, you always say, you religious people say that, you know what Ratzon Hashem is. Mm-hmm. But Hashem doesn't want us to do that. In the same sentence, the person was saying,
whatever.
Let's
He
say
says
whatever it was. I didn't want
know.
to. He says, you always say Hashem wants us to venture to do this and blah, 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 but Hashem doesn't want us to be such and such. And I said, but in the same
to bench?
sentence,
I don't understand.
If
it would be the same thing, it would be.
No, they were saying, religious people always say that they know what Hashem's will is. How do you know what His will is?
I don't know His whole will. It's just no part of it.
We're talking about halachically, and then some of it is written. Yeah, and some of it, and in the same sentence, the person would say, "But Hashem doesn't want us to be kacha." And I'm like, in the same sentence, you're saying, how do you know? But you know He doesn't like that. So where do you stand? How do you know He doesn't like that, as opposed to that?
How do you tell
And-
the person you don't know what they're talking
So,
about?
I understand.
So the person suddenly was like
They saw the
paradox,
contradiction in what they were
and they
saying.
started saying different things.
They did see it?
Yeah, they saw it very
I
clearly.
don't know, it was threatening, and it became different sentences, and I'm not going to talk again, and then the person ended up being sick at the end. And I was like,
Is that it?
Okay, what did I do here? I said I was
No,
trying
what
to-
did you do?
I said, first of all, I loved the person. I told them that, I really care. I want to learn. I want to know what they're thinking. I want to be able to communicate.
No, what did
And
you?
it's okay that we have, that I don't want to fight. I just want to understand them, and I want to show them something that, when I showed them the paradox, I think maybe I went too far. Maybe I shouldn't have showed
Or
them.
maybe you're not the one who should show it.
Exactly.
But I don't think that the reaction is wrong. I think that
Which reaction that I said?
what they experienced afterwards is exactly what happens when one of your main
I was breaking the base of.
one of the main things that you've been living off of turns out to be completely false, and you see it. What do you do after that? You're broken.
The person felt like I was putting them in a corner because at the end they said I want people to be like me, and I want to live in a circle where people believe like me, and I'm like, oh, okay, so say it, but they couldn't believe that they were judging what they were really believing in a different way. So,
It's exactly what happened to Avram and Terach. And Terach never got over it. He told him, how could it be? Don't talk nonsense.
yeah,
The big idol didn't
right.
hurt the other ones.
yeah,
So Avram says, "Yishmu, Abba, yishmu oznecha ma shepicha omer."
yeah,
They should hear what you're saying.
yeah.
But he never got over it. He never figured it out.
So is it right to do this to certain, if you see that,
Of course.
certain people are not able to really hold the paradox because it breaks their world.
Right. You have. I think you have to bring them to the moment before you say that sentence. Just the moment
For them
before.
to see it on their own.
For them to see it eventually in their own.
And if they're never gonna see it, which I shouldn't say that, but if I see that it's always like that, the person might probably continue that way. But not
Like all chinuch, it's there's no guarantees.
Okay.
You're not. A lot of psychology happens when people are confronted with their beliefs. a lot of inner searching and reconciliation with other people or with my life or things, is because a lot of psychology is about these impossible beliefs that I hold on to for some reason. And
But it was also good for me because, like, let's say my husband was saying, Leah, don't get into these conversations anymore with that person because it just ends up not well. And I said, but you know, for me, actually, it's really good because I'm starting to see more clearly the bilbul I came in from.
Okay.
You know, like you're saying, like the lack of,
It's
you know,
part
they're
of
this,
it.
but they're not this, and it's like this, and it's not that, and it's...
I think one of the big arts is how to tell when to for time that you feel that you're coming to a breaking point, and I don't want to be the one to break.
Mm-hmm.
That we talked about, that in general I don't want to be the one who, I mean, I'll confront you with it, but I don't want to give you the solution, which is to break. You have to give up
Maybe
one
my
side.
ego was there because I just, you know, sometimes I feel like I want to show them, do you understand? Like you're saying two things and you drove us crazy, then you have to see it. I'm like,
No, I see it. It's enough for me to see it, especially if it's apparent. It doesn't work that way. Speculative instead of empirical, but that's fine in Yetzirah. In Yetzirah, you don't have to be empirical. You don't have to be empirical.
so that's where all the healing comes in.
I can't invent an experiment to tell me exactly what's going on with this person. There's a lot of speculation going on.
No, that's what makes it scary to go out there and
Right,
do anything.
right. It's not an empirical science. It simply isn't, and you have to come to terms with it. There's nothing that's going to prove to you 100% that even what you did is what helped, or what you did was what caused more problems. I don't know.
Yeah.
There's no way to conduct empirical experiments when it comes to really working with the emotions. You can conduct experiments with behavior, but you can't conduct experiments with the emotions. Behavior is observable. We can observe behavior.
Which one's behavior?
Behavior would already be back in the world of action. And there it has to, in fact, that's why behaviorism is, that's why it's, why do Americans love CBT or neuro-linguistic programming, NLP, or all these things? Because these are the big products of American psychology, because they're very empirical. And so you know what? They work. Biofeedback. Biofeedback is a great way to help people with a lot of different issues, like anxiety. I just sent somebody to a big biofeedbackist
Who is
in
it?
Eretz Yisrael.
In here? There's a big biofeedbackist here?
Nobody here. He's in Be'er Sheva. I did biofeedback a long, long time ago for something physical, and I saw the benefits because it really helps. It's very empirical. Here's the machine. You're hooking you up. And you'll know when you're controlling it, you know when you're not controlling it, because you can't really tell if you're not hooked up to a machine. Machine is very empirical. Either you're sending impulses or you're not sending impulses to this muscle or whatever it is that you're trying to help with. But anxiety is the same way. You could hook somebody up to a machine and teach them how to go through a physical process to alleviate a lot of the suffering that comes from anxiety. Have I gone to the root cause? No. Have I solved anything in the emotions? No. But I've taught the person how to control their reactions.
So they have a makom, but when they claim to say that they know where it's coming from, then they're going a little bit too far, right?
No, maybe they even know.
Because
Maybe.
the Shita says I can really relieve someone from all their
There's-
energy blockages because they're stuck in the body.
What do you mean energy blockages?
You know, people
What are you
have-
talking
You're
about?
mixing modalities here.
Yeah, what are you talking about? Those people like.
No, that's not, whatever. Like, there's people who will say, like, they'll come and they'll say that, we have all kinds of energy blockages, and they manifest in the body.
I don't know what that means. I don't know how to deal with it. Sorry.
Okay.
I know how to deal with emotional blockages. Energy, I don't see.
No, emotional. It says that because,
so-
it's emotional, and because it's like there,
Okay,
it still
then-
bounces, and it also, like, at the end, it eats up the physical. It comes up
Could
the
be.
physical.
Could be.
And you can.
But it's entirely speculative.
Okay, just
I can't hook you up to a machine
But I'm
and
asking
tell you where your blockage emotionally is.
Fine, but like my question was, and after you said about the biofeedback, if a person, let's say, will not do a rectification of his midot, or he's not going to become, but you're helping him just like he's got a headache, so you're giving him Tylenol,
Exactly.
and now he can faint.
There's even more than that. There's this thing called brain's way, and people have deep depression that drugs don't work anymore.
Yeah.
So they hook them up to the machine.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a cap you put on the head,
Mm-hmm.
and it does like an electrical massage to the deep inside the brain, to areas that are known to relate to depression, and it helps a lot of people.
Okay.
It's better than
Okay.
placebo.
Okay.
So obviously something's going on. If they know 100% what's going on, I'm not sure.
When you do that.
But-
It's circulating the blood. I mean, that's not a big.
No, it's doing more than that. It's waves. It's electromagnetic
Yeah,
waves.
electric
What?
shock.
It's
That's
like
the way it used to
yeah,
be.
it's like
But it's
modern
in
electroshock, which is very focused. It's very directed and it's very low energy.
And what you're saying is better than placebo?
It works better than placebo. If I would just give them a pill,
Because
and it
there were
does
people who reacted and
33%.
Their systems started to work.
They
because
have something like 50 or 60% rate of success.
So you're saying let's alleviate the pain in any
Sure.
case, and then Bezrat Hashem,
And that's empirical. That I can do empirically.
Okay.
But to tell you exactly how to work with the emotions,
Okay.
that's speculative.
That's already a different. Okay.
Okay, so this is
If you said alleviating anxiety, that doesn't count as an emotion?
it's not an emotion because I'm not going to the root cause. I'm not even interested in it. I don't care. I'm just going to teach you how when your hands get clammy and your heart rate picks up and you lose focus or the opposite, you become overly focused. I'm going to teach you how to calm the body down.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the anxiety has to do with the physical symptoms that you experience. If a lot of these, it's almost like a trigger even. The people start feeling them, and then they lose it. Because here it comes. There's no way to stop it. But if you could stop it, then it's an incredible thing. You might be able to control anxiety.
Tu vas continuer de comprendre, like somebody who has schizophrenia and it's too much energy, too much, too many things, too many visions, everything is like coming and then.
With autism, this is something that's done, which is to increase, that's why you hug them, is to quiet down, like to create almost like a blob of what do you call it, stimuli. Because they're getting stimuli, like imagine just points and points and points from everywhere at the same time.
Right.
If you hold them, do this a lot. A lot of the healing that's done today with autism is just hold them tight. That itself softens the amount of it's like you sort of you massage it into becoming one big stimuli and stimulus, and they're calmed down and they can begin to focus on what's going on around
I was
them.
asking about biofeedback.
So they can learn to do it themselves eventually.
Right.
The same thing that I can do to you, you can learn how to do to yourself.
Theoretically,
Not just theoretically, this is done.
it's done. So,
Yeah. I don't know with biofeedback how successful it's been, but theoretically anything that you could affect you from the outside, you can also create from the inside. And again, I'm talking about physical effects, not something. Okay, so this means that if when first Eve goes back up, she goes back up in the world, everything she thinks is fine. There's nothing wrong with all these assumptions. It's just
But
that
she's in a desert.
she fell down.
Oh, she's still falling.
She's still fallen. She's not. Nobody's rectified her all the way up. It says that the Geulah is like a raising of the worlds, the elevation of the worlds. That each world goes at least one world up
Where will Atzilus go?
into Adam Kadmon.
And
Adam Kadmon will go before the Tzimtzum.
And there will be no Asiyah?
For instance, Adam Kadmon, what's his rectification? What does it mean that he goes? I said in Adam Kadmon, there is constancy, there is universality. What allows him to think that way, to see things that way? That there's a tzimtzum before him. After the tzimtzum, logic is just logic. 1 + 1 = 2. It can't be equal to 3. But before the tzimtzum, it wasn't limited that way. When Adam Kadmon goes up, he'll see that, wait a minute, this is not the only possible world. Hashem could have created it differently. This he can't see right now.
uh-oh. We're really going to see that?
If you're in Adam Kadmon, and that's where you're holding,
We reach that when we pass.
the main thing again is here that not to be locked into one way of thinking. If you're locked into it, just go up. Go up one. It's like ascend. Go up one level, and you'll see that one level higher, it's not the same issue. It's something else altogether.
Is that a connection between the flesh and the bone then?
So if we go back to the flesh and the bone,
And from his side?
that the fact that they're from the same itzim, we said that means that they're equal. The fact that she has to be, the flesh has to be closed, so that means that she's secondary to him, because flesh is dirty. It's not like bone. Bone is clean, it's hard, but flesh is all blue.
Force, if you.
What do you mean herb?
It's blood and flesh. It's this whole thing. It's
When
Messy.
you only find
messy.
bones
It's messy.
after a person after years
Yeah.
and years, you never find.
that's eternal. There's something, but the flesh is something. It's even described. It's like it's dirty. It's something. It's called the dam veririn. Is how it's described.
We need to wash them.
But more than that, it says the famous medrash says that why do women put perfume on and men don't?
They do.
Some of them do. Some of them are feminine. Today everybody's feminine.
It's called something
Okay,
else.
this is something. Right.
Oh, really? Oh, I didn't know.
I didn't know that.
Isn't that correct?
100%.
Also, no jewelry, right?
No, jewelry is not so much an issue. No, you can wear jewelry, but the big issue is the perfume. So it says why?
No makeup.
No makeup, because that's considered to be a feminine thing. So why can't you do this? Because it says that flesh stinks. It rots.
Yes.
But bones don't rot.
Mm-hmm.
So they don't stink.
The male aspect doesn't need.
So the male aspect, which is bones, it's eternal. It's very high. But it's like almost she's a skeleton. She fell down. She's not where she was. And because she fell down, so the whole world of thought fell down with her.
Yeah.
So it's creating all these mishagas in the world. And instead of being a buffer like Zilpa and Bilha were, they represent science. This is a whole topic in and of itself.
No, Menusi taught it.
You taught it.
That's right. That's right.
But they're the intellectual soul, if you want. That Leah and Rachel, together with Yaakov, they're the divine soul. And Bilha and Zilpa, they're the intellectual soul. So instead of forming a buffer, instead of forming something that helps you, that keeps you up, it all fell down, and then it became. So that's the whole story, you could say, of Purim is rectifying first Chava. How do we see that? Because what's the theme? What did it all start with? First of all, to get rid of Vashti. Why? Because if we don't get rid of Vashti, how do I know she's first Chava? Because she also made a banquet. She also had people. And then he said, I want to show her beauty.
Right.
Meaning he's treating her like what? Like second Chava, not like first Chava. And then the advice to kill her, because it's like Rachel, she's beautiful, she's subservient. He wants to show she's under him. He doesn't want to show that she's equal to him.
It's just come out of us.
I didn't think she minded. I think because just Hashem made her look, something happened to her physically, so she couldn't show her.
Instead of that, she already minded before that. Because it's not only that she's the real queen, she's the royalty, and he's just a servant. Really.
Table boy.
Okay.
But she was not Jew.
No.
It doesn't matter. It's the same story everywhere.
Neither was first
And she was the queen.
first thing.
Uh-huh.
So he wanted her, and what was the advice that he got? That if you don't show
All the women.
all the women in the land will become equal to their to their husbands. So to prevent that, to prevent Vashti's legacy, you have to kill her. Not only that, you have to replace her with somebody else. What kind of person? Esther. Esther, she's beautiful. Nobody knows who she is. She doesn't know. She was 80-something years old. She's beautiful. So when the real beauty starts coming out, 80 years old.
70.
And it says he was 70?
70, because she was born just when the base of Mikdash.
Okay. So, and she's just like a showpiece. That's all she is. Nobody knows who she is. She doesn't open her mouth. Nothing. She's just there for the beauty of it. That's what he wants.
That's what he thought he was getting.
But the amazing thing is that whose side was Haman on?
His own son.
No, the
hated
son of-
Vash.
At which point in the story?
At all the points in the story. What does he stand for?
Not the woman.
Ego. Ego, no?
It's not so simple. Why? That we
The
talked about.
unrectified ego.
We said that the other one there's in the Megillah there's 3 women that are like Chava Rishona. So Esther, his wife is another one of them,
Oh,
Zeresh.
Zeresh, yes, of course.
But it's more than that. It's that in Amalek, the big thing about Amalek, this is how they try to picture it today in
He's like
ancient
He's
Greece.
like a dumb that kicked his wife out of.
No, the opposite. They try to show that the ancient Greeks were like this. There were nothing like that. Amalek was like this. It says that in Amalek, the women and men were totally equal. There was no difference between them. So that can be also a negative thing. But in principle, that he's married, he never separates in the story. And eventually they kill him. But Zeresh is not thrown out of the house. He doesn't separate. On the contrary.
No,
In fact, in a certain sense,
Seems
Smarter than him.
right, in a certain sense, well, at least you'd say he's in competition with her.
Okay.
Okay?
Yes.
That he's not getting a lot
With
of,
everyone.
but you see in their interactions, but there's a proof for it. There's even a proof
So that would make
that they're equal. They're
Yeah.
mamish equal.
But he asked her advice.
In that sense, it's that Amalek is Rashid Goyim. They have something very deep in them that they're like showing you, we reached the finish line long before you did. That we were already way, way, way ahead of you, because in our houses, the women and the men are totally equal. And the proof that it says this is the Rav taught this 4 years ago in Purim. It's from a big, probably the man who raised the Keren HaTorah, the value of Torah in America.
Oh, wait a minute, so that's where the reform come from?
What?
That's where the reform come from? That the women can take the Torah, she's equal?
So again,
the
it's
rabbi
like,
and the king?
but the question is whether it's done properly. But we said the idea is that this has to be rectified. That this is the real objective in the end. That they have to become equal in stature. But this man, his name was, now I forget. He's a mamish a Gaon from Europe that came to America, and he lived in Baltimore. He came in the 1930s, and he was a Talmud of the Avnei Nezer from the Sochotchev. And his name was, I forget. And he was the first real genius of Torah in America. And everybody came to him. The Satmar Rebbe and the Rebbe Rayatz was in touch with him, and all the yeshivot, all the Litvish yeshivot were also in touch with him. He was a chassid. He studied by the Sochotchev. Sochotchev was the Eglei Tal, the Avnei Nezer.
What was the name?
What's his name?
And what did you say was
Eglei Tal and Avnei Nezer. On the Shas it's Avnei Nezer, and he has a shut, Avnei Nezer, and in the Hilchos Shabbos he wrote a book called Eglei Tal. And his name is, and how do I know him? Because Yudis, who used to come here, so her husband is his great nephew. Forschlager was his name.
That's his
And
name.
he's almost not known. But when you read about his history, you see that every single yeshiva in America, whatever it was they all came to him. He was like, and he lived in a little house in Baltimore, and he just learned all day, and he was, and he encouraged opening yeshivot and learning more, and it was a very special, unique individual. You deceased it. She was the one who turned me on to him originally. She even gave it. His writings. He has tons of writings, like 70 something notebooks of chidushim. So he has this beautiful chiddush. All of his chiddushim are very, very deep because both Chassidus, Kabbalah, and Nigla. He's just so eclectic. So he has this whole thing about Haman being perfectly equal with his wife, and he mentions this whole story with first Chava, that the reason is because Zeresh was a Gilgal of first Chava.
Wow.
And he shows from the interaction that Shaul had with Amalek, I can't remember the pasuk right now, he shows from the pasuk that the men and women were entirely equal. It's his chiddush. Nobody ever learned that pasuk that way. But it's like that in everywhere it says et atzon ve'et bakar, something like that, but then it says anashim gvarim, or something that there's no even, like they're just joined into one.
It's Mahoil Eliezer Vorschlager.
Right. Vorschlager.
Rabbi Kugel.
Yeah. So he's an incredible individual. Why is it related? Because I think he passed away in Purim.
Wow.
That's the connection. I don't remember.
Directions to his
Does it say?
paper if you Google
In Baltimore,
it.
probably.
In Baltimore,
Yeah.
right.
Anyway,
But again, Vashti, Zeresh, and Esther. So
That's Avaz.
Vashti,
Oh,
Avaz. Goose.
Esther
Good, good, well,
Esther is the
but,
second.
but what's the, like, Vashti is...
Well, they took her as a second Chava, but she's not. I mean, Achashverosh connected her because she's like a second Chava, but she's really the first Chava. She's just a rectified version. So what does the rectified version look like?
Who's the
That-
rectified
Esther.
version?
Esther.
Esther?
A
Oh,
rectified
the
version of the first.
Of the first two?
No, of first Chava.
The first one, okay.
Oh, they did.
How come? In what?
You don't know why.
Sorry?
How come?
How come?
What makes her the rectified version of the first Chava?
Because apparently she's smart enough to
Yeah.
be equal with Mordechai completely,
Open her mouth when the clothes.
and with Achashverosh she can play the game of I'm just beautiful. She knows how to.
She has
knows
the
how to-
power to send her shed and
right, and she remains clean. And,
Yeah.
But even for now, about something very interesting which I never knew. So how come she went in, she initiated like that? Usually Tzaddikim would never want to do the Ratzon Hashem by doing an Averah. And she Balayla, like she understood like the Siman from the Mala already. So before that she wouldn't have gone, in any case, to save the Jewish people. So she realized there was a sign from above that said that it's gonna I have to do it now. And also they were asking why the first day she said come to the next day.
Yeah, why?
Because that day a man came, he was happy,
He was Alagova.
he was Alagova, and then the next day he comes, he was like,
Now's the time.
it's like now you give him one and that's it, you finish it.
Right.
But what I liked the idea is usually we had but Balayla Nadidashna Tamelech was already a sign that the Hashem was waking up before us.
Right.
We didn't wake him up. He woke up, she realized that, and because of that she's going into that kind of Mesirut Nefesh. So that means she's so like she's something. And at
So
the end
the
she
Rebbe says
realized-
that we woke him up. How did we wake him up? Because that whole year there was Mesiras Nefesh. Nobody left the Yiddishkeit. Everybody
Okay,
remained a
okay.
Jew during that year when it was clearly evident that everybody would die.
Yeah.
So that was the Mesiras Nefesh that woke Hashem up.
Okay.
So anyway,
But
It's
Esther's
always
a rectified
more-
version, but she's still in the desert. We've
so
not
it's the same.
rectified it.
No, she's back into civilization again. It's like
So she
that the
changed her
intellect-
reality, basically.
it's that also, but the main thing is she can marry. She's not again. Think of witches as the unrectified form of first Chava, that they can't live together with a man. There's something that doesn't work there. And the moment that she can live together with a man, So that's rectified already. That means she accepts the idea that there are two kings and they have one crown.
Wow.
So is that Koch now being rectified in the world, you're saying?
Hopefully.
Because since Esther, there
Okay.
isn't that Koch in the world anymore.
No, like all these things,
So
there's
process over time,
there's all, and the modern feminism is really the thing that has to be rectified the most.
So it hasn't been rectified. She hasn't been rectified for him.
Ken, but you can't say that until this generation it was so prominent, it was so everywhere, that everybody knows feminism. There's now this girl on
Just now
YouTube.
with
You-
Trump came back the whole march of the women.
Right. So there's this one woman from, she seemed very young, like mid-20s, maybe late 20s, from Canada, who held up a sign. I'm a woman and I don't feel the need to be a feminist. She's very eloquent and very like she's sort of like, again, these crossovers, like if anybody's heard Milo Yiannopoulos. Anybody heard of him? I've talked about him before. He's really he does a job on your mind. Because here's this Jewish guy who's Greek. It is homosexual, and he's against homosexuals.
So what?
He's a homosexual, but he's against it in the sense that he says, if there was any way that I could take a pill and be straight, I would right away.
Wow.
And he says, because of that, we don't deserve anything special. And he's far right. But he's not a mess. He's very clear. He's very eloquent. He's very straight. And his thinking is very, very straight. It's amazing. And he plays with people's minds. They just don't. This is like one of the things that this whole Trump thing did. It's like it confused everybody. That like they were playing with these set of rules that everything had to be left. And suddenly you get these people that are more left than left, but they're completely on the right. And now they're like, huh? What happened? So Milo, he's one of these. And this woman, I can't remember her name right now. She has tens of millions of views on the internet. And she goes like into the hardcore leftist places, feminist places. And she speaks like, I'm against feminism. I don't need feminism. It's like, I'm beyond that. I don't need that whole thing. Anyway, I can't. Robin something is her name.
What's her
Therefore, what's your
message?
conclusion?
That I'm not against living with men. I'm okay with it. I don't have to be against somebody to. Again, the whole thing is like I can't get along because I have my agenda and all you're doing is spoiling your what do you call it? No, sabotaging it, but no, not a bigot, but whatever. Like racism is when you're prejudiced against me because I'm a woman. She says, I don't need that. I'm way beyond that. And that's already rectified, I think. And it's also the same thing if for instance, for some, like Dvorah, how was she a shofetet? Because she was the greatest Navi at the time. There was nobody like her. What do you think, that if a woman was the greatest Rabbi, people wouldn't go to her? Of course they would go to her. People need people are really great. You don't have to push. You don't have to push yourself if you really are. So it'll work. It's the same idea. It's that simple. If a woman was the greatest Talmid Chacham today, so you really think that she wouldn't be able to write Shutim, and people would say, "Well, a woman wrote this. We don't have to take this into account." Okay, same idea. If you're really great, so you're great. That's it. There's nothing inborn or innate into Yiddishkeit that a woman can't be something. It's just that it hasn't happened. So somebody says, because you haven't let us.
What do you mean?
So, so when it did happen, there were Rebbes, there were women. There were women Rebbes also. People used to come to them. Yeah. They had the need to keep their tznius, so they didn't see them face to face. But they gave brachos the same way. They took vidlach the same way.
Well, the Rebbe said that. The Rebbe said.
Okay.
That letter, like someone gave the Rebbe a letter, says for bracha from the Rebbe. And
The Rebbe said you already gave it to her.
The back's like, you know, she give the same blessings as me. More than whatever. Yeah.
Okay, discriminate. Yeah, somebody said discriminate. Right. Okay, so with that spirit, we go into Purim and saying that the real issue of Purim is rectifying first Chava. Is to elevate all the worlds, and it means the elevation of the feminine. It's the end of the year also. And it's called Esther. Everything points in this direction, that it's the fixing of the whole feminine principle.
So does that mean the energy of Purim, does that do something for this agenda?
Yeah.
To what happens on Purim that transforms us? Or do you may want to leave, you know, last one?
Every person with his
Maybe that's why we don't have to
abilities.
drink. So,
What, women?
Where does it say you don't have to?
Yeah, who said we don't have to drink?
If you have that, you have to have Adonai that.
even women?
Maybe we
guess
don't
so.
have to do it.
Huh?
Say them.
I heard that